European leaders are facing what UK Prime Minister has called a once-in-a-generation moment as they hold talks to find ways to end the Ukraine war in London. Ahead of the summit that is underway at the moment, the UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer said that Britain and France are working with Ukraine on plans to end the fighting with Russia. Starmer has urged world leaders to work together, saying nobody wants to see scenes like Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and US counterpart Donald Trump's clash at the Oval on Friday. Ahead of the crucial crisis talks, Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni warned that it is very, very important to avoid the risk that the West divides. Meloni said the UK and Italy can play an important role in bridge building. We will be updating you on the developments of that summit. Well, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is in London for a crucial summit with European leaders. The meeting comes 2 days after a tense clash with US President Donald Trump at the Oval. The summit, hosted by UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer, aims to address 3 key issues: meeting Ukraine's immediate needs, working towards a lasting peace deal, and strengthening security guarantees for the country. Ahead of the meeting, Starmer and Zelensky signed a $2.8 billion loan agreement to boost Ukraine's defense, with the first installment expected next week. Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, French President Emmanuel Macron, Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk, and NATO Chief Mark Rutte were greeted by UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer as they arrived at London's Lancaster House for the crisis talks on Ukraine. The UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer says Britain and France will work on a peace deal with Ukraine and present it to President Donald Trump.
We've now agreed that the United Kingdom, along with France and possibly 1 or 2 others, will work with Ukraine on a plan to stop the fighting. And then we'll discuss that plan with the United States. So in those calls on Friday night, through the meeting yesterday, into the calls again last night, I think we've got a step in the right direction because, as I say, nobody wants to see what happened on Friday, but it's really important that we keep our central focus, which is lasting peace in Ukraine.
The diplomatic push comes at a delicate moment where the US president accused Volodymyr Zelensky of being ungrateful and risking World War III. This has shaken European nations. The incident threatens to reverse diplomatic gains made just days ago. European leaders have rallied behind Zelensky after Trump's furious exchange with the Ukrainian president. The leaders of Germany, France, Spain, Poland, and the Netherlands were among those who posted social media messages backing Ukraine, with Zelensky responding directly to each one of them to thank them for their support. The spat has intensified the pressure on European nations to fill gaps in US military aid and make a decision whether they can go it alone in arming Ukraine. European policymakers are reviewing their weapons stocks to assess how much they could marshal up. There are also calls for Zelensky to repair his relationship with the US and its president. Meanwhile, Russia has praised Trump and scolded Europe for seeking to continue the war in Ukraine. Foreign Minister Lavrov called Trump's aim to end the war in Ukraine pragmatic.
Trump, он прагматик. Вот это его лозунг «здравый смысл».
Trump, he is a pragmatist. His slogan is common sense, of course means, and everybody already see it, a shift to a different way of doing things. But the goal is still MAGA, make America great again. He has got a new cap now. Everything that Trump promised, he did. You see, this gives politics a lively human character. That is why it is interesting to work with him.
Придает такой живой характер, человеческий характер.
The Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov says Trump and Putin's Ukraine policy largely coincides. In an interview that was recorded before Trump's Zelensky fallout in Washington, D.C., the Kremlin continues to insist that Kiev must accept its terms for peace, which includes territorial concessions that Ukraine has repeatedly rejected. Dr. Zachary Paikin is a Deputy Director of the Better Order Project at the Quincy Institute for Responsible Statecraft in Washington, D.C. He is also Senior Fellow at the Institute for Peace and Diplomacy. Mr. Paikin, thank you very much for making time for us and welcome to the program. The summit is currently underway in London. Let's just try and understand some of these statements coming from the leaders there. I'll begin with what Keir Starmer is saying, that this is a once-in-a-generation moment and we do not want to see what happened at the Oval on Friday happening again. Why do European leaders feel the need to report what they find or what they conclude to Donald Trump?
Well, the reality is that Europe depends on the United States for its security and has for some time now. And so as much as the Europeans would like to be able to deal with this issue exclusively on their own terms, they're unable to do so. And you're seeing this, for example, in the proposals that Sir Keir and others have put forward to have some kind of European troop deployment on Ukrainian soil as some kind of guarantee of Ukraine's security, but they're insisting, at least as of right now, that this would necessitate some kind of U.S. backstop. It would certainly require American logistical assistance just to be able to operate, but there's also a sense that it would require a backstop of some kind on top of that. That is to say that if those European troops were to come under attack, that the United States would somehow be compelled to intervene. And that just shows that many European leaders and President Zelensky himself as well have made very clear that the only credible security guarantee, in their view, is a U.S. security guarantee. Unfortunately, President Trump and his administration have made it clear that that's not an option for them, and they have very good reasons for doing so. They don't believe that the defense of Ukraine, if it means a direct war between NATO and Russia, is in the national interests of the United States. And so we're going to have to explore other options. Options that are not currently, at the front of the agenda, but that nonetheless would be very significant for Ukraine's security, including armed neutrality. We have to acknowledge that President Putin of Russia started this war with an attempt to demilitarize Ukraine, to put a major cap on the size of its armed forces. These negotiations, if they do actually take root, represent a significant opportunity for Ukraine to be able to secure Russian acquiescence to a large Ukrainian army to serve as an effective security guarantee for Ukraine, but under the context of neutrality. But all of that, of course, requires a ceasefire first for the Ukrainian armed forces to regroup. And that's the direction I think that talks should be moving towards.
Dr. Paikin, in reality, there are two camps here. One camp is US and Putin. The other camp is Zelensky and Europe. And we've seen what the Italian Prime Minister, Giorgia Meloni, has said, that this can never break or can never divide the West from us. So going forward, who is the pacifier here? Who is the peacemaker here?
Well, on Ms. Meloni's comments, we've heard this many times before from European leaders that, unity is the most important thing and we need to maintain Western unity. But unity at the expense of substance is not useful when it comes to actually achieving the vision that you want to put forward for a more lasting European security. And that's exactly what we've seen over the past 3 years. Unfortunately, we've seen Western leaders, thump their chests and celebrate, and pat themselves on the back about how united we are and that NATO is reaching new heights and how wonderful this all is. But that's not really a recipe for peace. To go back to your question, if we want peace, we actually have to have discussions over what the future of Europe's security order is going to look like. And whether we like it or not, that requires talking to Russia. Because Russia is a significant power, perhaps not as significant a power as we thought it was on the eve of the war in 2022, but still a very important power in very important ways. And we don't have a unipolar Europe. We don't have a balance of power in Europe in which one actor or set of actors can simply dictate terms and everyone else simply has to accept them. So unless we have some kind of European security order that includes, some kind of, acquiescence to some of Russia's desires and stated security concerns, you're not going to have security in Europe. Okay. So those voices who are claiming that they're in favor of peace and in favor of Ukraine need to acknowledge that the best way to actually achieve European security and Ukrainian security is through a deal, ultimately, that's negotiated that allows all sides to save face, however imperfect it may be. And then the task of maintaining security requires dialogue beyond that, continuous dialogue, talking to each other rather than talking at each other.
All right. Dr. Zachary Paikin, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you very much for talking to us today.
Thank you.